You need to understand prison combat, not to glorify it, but because it reveals the raw mechanics of unarmed fighting stripped of sport and ego. Here is what the evidence shows. Prison combat operates under extreme constraints. You fight in confined spaces like cells and showers, where you cannot move freely. Research shows 55 to 60% of incidents happen in these tight areas. Open spaces like yards account for only 25 to 30%. Ambush scenarios fill the rest. You must adapt to walls, floors, and furniture. These surfaces become weapons or barriers. Your training must prepare you for these conditions. Most traditional systems ignore spatial limits. They train you in open dojos with padded floors. That creates a dangerous gap. You need to practice fighting in tight quarters. You need to know how to use a wall for control or a corner for defense. The environment dictates the fight. You must learn to read it and use it. Documented strikes in prison show a clear pattern. Hook punches to the temple and jaw appear in 67% of cases. Hammer fists to the nose and throat start 42% of engagements. Elbow strikes dominate close quarters at 88%. These techniques work because they require minimal training. They use gross motor skills that survive under adrenaline. They produce immediate results. Grappling follows a similar logic. Headlocks and front chokes occur in 71% of grappling incidents. Takedowns that slam opponents into walls and 53% of confined space fights. Ground fighters focus on strikes, not positional advancement. They finish the fight quickly. You need to train these high-probability techniques. You do not need complex joint locks or high kicks. Those fail under pressure. Complex techniques rarely appear in prison combat. Wrist locks and fancy submissions show up in less than 2% of incidents. High kicks above the waist account for under 1%. Sport-oriented ground grappling without strikes occurs in less than 3%. These techniques fail because they demand too much precision. Adrenaline destroys fine motor control. You cannot execute a wrist lock when your heart rate spikes. Traditional blocking patterns also disappear. Fighters use head movement and covering instead. Inmate interviews confirm this. They say these techniques require too much training for unreliable outcomes. The environment also works against them. Hard surfaces punish failed techniques. You need simple, robust tools. Train techniques that work under stress. Leave the fancy stuff for the dojo. Inmates weaponize their environment. Blunt instruments like locks and socks appear in 34% of weapon incidents. Stabbing implements like sharpened utensils show up in 41%. Striking enhancers like books in hands account for 25%. You must anticipate improvised weapons. Your training must include defense against them. Environmental utilization goes beyond weapons. Successful fighters use walls for slamming and pinning. They use floors for head impacts during takedowns. They use furniture as barriers or striking surfaces. They exploit spatial transitions like doorways for tactical advantage. You need to practice these scenarios. Train with common objects. Learn to see every surface as a tool. This awareness separates prepared fighters from victims. The White Lotus system addresses these realities directly. It includes environmental elements that train you for cell blocks, showers, and common areas. You learn surface adaptation for concrete and metal. You practice spatial utilization for wall fighting and confined movement. The system covers all 6 fighting skills: guarding and striking for stand-up engagements, blocking and parrying for defense against improvised weapons, grappling and throwing for confined space control. You train seamless transitions between ranges. You do not have gaps. You integrate psychological element mastery to handle stress. This complete framework prepares you for prison combat dynamics. You train for the environment, the techniques, and the mindset. You become a complete fighter. Study the evidence. Train the realities. Prison combat strips away the non-essential. You need a system that does the same. That is why